Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for May 21st, 2023. And I'm JD Duran.
I'm Ryan McQuaid.
Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. We're here to talk about family. Ryan, you ready to talk about some family?
I am, and I'm here to also talk about a bunch of other things that will randomly, sporadically go us on tangents that will make us have to spawn off a ton of unnecessary sequels that will then force us to spend hundreds of millions of dollars when we can give it to various other auteur directors that could give us the passion projects that we damn well deserve. But instead, we're filling the void that is lost within Vin Diesel's heart, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
I mean, to be fair to Vin Diesel and Universal, these films have made gobs of money.
True.
Gobs and gobs of money over the last 2 decades. So I understand
Like the
why
word
they
gobs.
keep making these.
Sounds like
And-
a gusher.
And if anyone listened to the main show episode we did on episode 534, you know, when we were talking about the Fast and Furious franchise, I noted that's why I'm dubious that this is the end, unless for whatever reason these last 2 or 3 films do not do quite as well at the box office. If we as a people have decided we are done with Fast and Furious and they don't do all that well, then it'll be the end. But if these films keep making $1 bajillion, it's not ending here. It's not going to end with this closing trilogy or whatever it ends up being. So, you know, we'll see. But to your point, Ryan, I think we're just going to be talking about these films for a long time still.
Yeah, the wheels have been circling around this franchise for a long, long time. Maybe it needs some new people behind the wheel. You'll never know. But
Yeah.
for right now, these are the passengers we have, and we're going to take a long, smooth drive down the road of trying to figure out this movie.
Yeah. So before we
Lot of puns.
before we hit the Nas button on Fast X, I want to get your thoughts on the Fast and Furious franchise, because you were not able to be there for episode 534. And so, you know, where I got to talk about it a little bit, and I'll, you know, certainly regurgitate my thoughts here real quick for those that didn't listen as well. But you haven't had a chance to talk about this franchise in recent weeks with us. So before we get into Fast X, your overall thoughts on this franchise?
I'm just glad to be here and the contract dispute that I had.
Yeah,
I
we
couldn't
worked through that.
I
Yeah.
mean, like, I feel like The Rock, obviously my beef, Brendan. I just
Exactly.
picked for somebody, and I just did an episode with Jay, and I'm doing one with you, so Brendan loses by default. But I'm glad to be here and talk about it. I was very bummed I couldn't be there. I felt like the missing person of family. Also, you guys got to pick out like your Fast and Furious character. Kind of found that BS that I wasn't even there to like. I didn't want to be like, felt like I was like Paul Walker or something like that.
Well,
would have
what
been
is
like,
your Fast and Furious character? You can do that right now. You
I
don't have to
mean,
be left out.
I mean, I feel like I'm like the kind of nonchalant, which is all the characters, you know, sort of fan favorite. You know, I feel like I'm the fan favorite. You know what I mean? I think
So you're
I put up with a
ludicrous.
lot. Well, I think I'm Han in a lot of ways.
Oh, Han
I'm also,
is very much a fan favorite. Sure.
I think, you know, I've died and I've been resurrected.
You've died,
And it's not like I'm going to
who has it, right?
and it's not like I'm going to explain it any better than the damn films did. So in
Exactly.
particular, you know, and I do like a nice snack, and he likes his snacks.
He does.
So
His muffins.
yeah,
Loves
he
his
likes-
muffins.
Loves a muffin. Loves some chips. He likes chips a lot. I don't think
Yeah.
if you know, definitely that. I mean, I could be that. I could be, you know, I mean, The Rock's not a bad move in this franchise.
No,
You know what
I
I mean?
agree.
It's pretty
agree.
cool.
Yes.
When he tells Jason Statham, I want to beat him like a Cherokee drum, chills. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I know Jay is like more like a Roman type, which is that what he picked?
I can't remember, but
did you remember
we
what
can
you
pretend?
did you kind of pick Dom?
Well,
Like, since you're like the leader of us.
Yeah, like I think they just automatically thrust the leader role on me because I guess I started this whole shindig, so I guess I'm kind of the dom of the group.
Yeah, and much like the Fast and Furious franchise, we've gone on way too long.
We've gone on way too long.
Yeah. But we're just going to keep doing it, and someone tells us to please.
Please, let's just get this show on the road. All right.
So my reactions to this franchise, the first. Okay, let's say. I mean, obviously, you guys talked about eras. I'm not going to try to do it too long because we have like a bet here to see which will be longer, this episode or the main show this week. Exactly. And then I have a feeling
we're on our way.
We're on our way. So I think the first four movies establish an inconsistency, sort of like an aimlessness of because they're just streetcar movies and they're kind of police procedurals and obviously the first one is like a Point Break ripoff and then the second one doesn't have, and then Vin leaves and it becomes like a Paul Walker vehicle, and then Walker doesn't get invited to the third one, and Tokyo Drift arrives and it's kind of got some interesting like energy to it, right? And then the fourth one comes along and it's a shit movie. And then so you're kind of like, God, what is this franchise doing? And then like Fast 5 comes along and the reviews were great and the movie was great and injected The Rock, and you're like, okay, wow. And this is weirdly like a prequel. And then 6 comes out and 5's still the best. And 6 comes out and it's pretty good. And you're like, wow, this is really great. Like they're on a roll. Like these are some fun movies. Sure, there's some dumb shit in it, but like, these still, I mean, it's no different kind of like at that point for Fast 6, there's no different kind of like the dumb shit that happens in like a John Wick movie, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like you got to suspension of disbelief, but still based a little bit in reality.
Yeah.
Then Paul Walker dies, obviously. Fast 7, I thought was really good. Another great film. I think 5, 6, and 7 are the best of the
really good trilogy.
I mean, like those are the best of what we ever got. And then I did listen to the show, and I agree with Jay. I think that like post 7, post Walker, post this now weird realm where we can talk about Brian because he's alive, but can't use him because Walker's dead. These movies have gone into just like Gonzo Bizarro world.
Yeah,
where
but
they
you
are
heard Jay's thoughts on AI Paul Walker, right? So.
Yes, I did, and I'm not. You know what? I gotta say this.
He could come back.
He's not. No, I honestly, we will get into. I think by the end of this review, we'll get into some spoilers a little bit, JD, because it's kind of you.
Yeah, no, we can.
You kind of have to.
I feel like we need to. Yeah,
but I think one of the spoilers, and it's not for this film, but I do think that they're teasing the audience. They're giving you a little bit, like giving you a crumb before they give you the cookie.
Yes.
Of the fact that they're giving you so many of these characters returning over these last couple of films that I do think, JD, that it is leading towards, what is it? 12 being the sort of 12 pack of Corona.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to sell it in. The movies, by the way, it's gonna be great. Is the 12th one will reveal that they've either brought Paul Walker's brother back with like CGI and whatnot, and he does play a role in the film in a significant fashion because they've just teased it enough. And you can talk about it a little bit in this movie too. Like there's a sequence where a couple like by the end of it, like Jordana Brewster's like, I gotta go check on
Brian and the kids.
Brian and the kid. I'm like, bullshit. No, like he'd be there kicking honestly, butt. He'd be there with you. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you bring it up now, and it makes sense given the context of how we started this conversation. So I know we're jumping the gun here, but to complement what you're saying there, one of the first things I noticed about this movie, it was the first thing I wrote down in my notes in preparation for this conversation, is that the spirit of Brian lingers all over this movie.
Yes, it does.
It lingers all over this movie. Now, is that simply to maintain Brian as a piece of this franchise spiritually in some sort of way? It could be that, or, and I hate to, I guess, maybe play the cynical card or give credence to Jay's idea, as silly as it was.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
I do think that Brian,
through you.
Brian very much could come back in some sort of CGI kind of way, or maybe they just recast. And if you're going to bring the character back, that's probably what you should do. You know, and I know that's going to be controversial no matter how you do it, but it does seem, to your point, that that Fast X anyway, as it begins to conclude this franchise with whatever this trilogy is going to look like, that they are foreshadowing Brian's return. It very much felt like that because his spirit lingers all over the movie.
Yeah. So real quick, 8, a weird calculated misstep that doesn't work all the way. I think it's trying to figure out like what they are going to do in a post-Walker world.
Mm-hmm.
One of the worst things that they've ever done in this franchise. And I love her to death. I just cannot vibe with Charlize Theron in these movies. She just tonally just does not work. She's just also too good of an actress for them because like they're all not very good. And Jay is correct. Hobbs and Shaw abomination
it's abysmal
is
it's not good. Yeah.
Like Hobbs and Shaw : an abomination is actually what the movie should have been called. Truly. And it's crazy because Shaw and Hobbs are actually some of the great things about
like
their
as
individual
characters.
films.
I love them.
They're great in all the movies.
They're fun.
Even in 8, there's like a scene with the baby and Jason Statham.
The Rock kicking or torpedo. I talked about that.
I mean, like
on the last episode.
Yeah, I mean, like that
just
scene
incredible.
rules. I mean, like there's some good stuff in it, but it's also like on the whole, it's like shit.
Yeah, on the whole, not great.
9 was a bit of a surprise. I had fun with 9. I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything. I just think that like it was a surprise because 8 wasn't good, so 9 kind of surprised me.
Okay, fair.
And the space stuff though, abysmal. And now that leads us to here. So I think that the 3 in the middle are the best. The stuff at the front is you kind of got to use it to get there, and then like the stuff up to this has either been mixed. Like I think so now we're here at 10.
Yeah, and now we're here at 10. Forgive the redundancy for those that did listen to episode 534, but just in case, some context, I'm more or less in the same camp as Ryan. The first one is a fun ripoff of Point Break. You know, it's certainly regurgitating a lot that came before it, but still does it in a fun way, utilizes that street racing aesthetic very well. Too Fast, Too Furious comes along, a lesser movie, but as we noted on episode 534, it has its own aesthetic and its own vibe that carries over through a lot of the 2000s. And again, say what you will about the film, but that title has its own lore behind it now. Like it has its own legacy, which I think is kind of hilarious. Tokyo Drift, I think, is really good, even though at the time it was like a direct-to-video kind of movie. I don't even know if it went to theaters. But
no, it did. It did.
It did it. Okay, so either way, it felt
it wasn't
like
supposed
it was one
to,
of those.
but it did. Yeah,
yeah, but it was good. Arguably the best of that original 3.
Yeah,
and then 4 comes out. It's not great, but you can see the franchise turning, and then you get that 5, 6, and 7 trilogy, which is a lot of fun and has come to define this franchise. And I'm with you. 8 is not good on the whole, but has 3 of the better action sequences, like in a vacuum. If you just look at the action sequences on their own, there's some really good stuff in 8 in that regard. You're certainly higher on 9 than I am. I didn't really like 9 all that much coming into this. And so 10 for me was the film didn't have to do much, I think, to rise above 8 and 9 for me. We'll see as we get into this conversation if it did do that. But I was walking into 10 with some anticipation, given my overall thoughts on the franchise, despite the last 2 efforts. So with that said, let's go ahead and transition to Fasten Your Seatbelts. Which is not directed by Justin Lin. He got out of there as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah. Those set photos were like, get me out of here. 911.
This is directed by Louis Leterrier instead. It, of course, stars Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, Ludacris, John Cena, and a bunch of other. Brie Larson is in this film. A bunch of people will come and go. And there's, of course, some cameos that we'll get to at the end of this. There are, I guess, some spoilers that we'll have to talk about. However, there is one name that I leave out there because Fast 10, as far as I am concerned, Fast X, however you want to articulate that, the conversation around this film begins and ends with Jason Momoa. He is incredible in this movie, and it to me is exactly what this franchise needed. But as we jump into it, Ryan, what did you think about Fast 10?
This movie's stupid, but damn, I had fun with it. Big, dumb, stupid fun with it. And there are so many moments, man, where one minute I'm rolling my eyes and just being like, get me the hell out of here. And other moments, I'm like, this is really cool. And then there's other moments where that makes absolutely no damn sense. And then there's moments where you're just like, oh, wow, they have a bad CGI budget. And then there's like, wow, Dom Toretto, Vin Diesel can't act. And oh my God, there's so many characters. And oh my God, there's so many explosions. Oh my God, there's so many stories and everything. And weirdly, it shouldn't work. And I know have become weirdly the apologist for, I think here, the sort of jumbled up slop, the dumpster whoppers of old, where this reminded me a lot, JD, of the 90s, 2000s sort of sloppy movies, sloppy action movies that we got a lot when we were kids. That are sort of what the foundation of the Fast and Furious franchise were they had something that made them better than just the average crap. You know what I mean? And there was something about them, like, it shouldn't all work. The direction of this movie is not good. The script is hanging on by a thread. The acting in here...
There's a script?
Sure. The acting in here is uneven in every scene. Except
there's one major exception.
There's one major exception. And it is the jolt of energy no one would have thought about for this franchise. And that's Jason Momoa.
Oh, yes. As I noted. Yeah.
For the first time in this franchise history, there's actually a villain. And this villain is not going to show up probably in the next film at the barbecue drinking a Corona with the family. All right?
Yeah.
There's serious ramifications to the actions that Jason Momoa's character in this film does. And it actually, for the first time in 3 films, feels like it's all going to stick. Yeah. And I think that this is the best one since 7. And I think that doesn't mean that it's perfect, because there's some things, JD knows I love talking about logic. There is one logic thing here. There's a couple of logical things. And it's not even really the action sequences, because I give a shit about that. There's a sequence in this movie that I think is one of the dumbest things I think I've ever seen in a movie in a long time. And I can go into it now if you'd like me to explain it real quick.
No,
but I
let's
can,
just get,
but
kinda
I'll
get
wait.
through initial thoughts.
But I'll
here.
wait. But I can tell you this is that Momoa gives just this sort of it reminded me a lot. And then I was talking with our good friend and my editor Eric Anderson over at Awards Watch of the sort of gay coded villains that you would get in like the 80s and the 70s and the 90s too, where they weren't gay, but they had this flamboyant nature to them, but yet there was something sinister underneath where you could, if you trusted them in one turn, you're going to get your throat slit. And then the other thing that, that they're going to have this, they're going to be laughing all the while the carnage is going on. And a lot of people want to just associate that to like a Joker mentality. And that's such a lazy way of kind of explaining what this complexity of doing a performance like this is.
Yeah.
And, I think we all kind of saw hints of that in the trailer, but we know this franchise would never give that, because like the one thing about Fast 9 that I don't like is the Pinocchio wooden performance by John Cena as the quote unquote bad guy in that movie, because of the fact that like it just doesn't feel right. And knowing that, to then see John Cena in this movie as Uncle Jacob,
Yeah.
is the second thing why I thought that this movie was way better than even the last one, because like this actually tapped into why Cena's such a good and fun actor. He's a great comedian.
That charm. Yeah.
That charm, that comedic timing that he has, the great chemistry with Little B, Brian Jr. here. I still can't believe he named his son after Brian. It's one of the it's silly. It's just silly. Dom. But
you mean I can't name my next child Ryan Jr.?
I didn't say that.
I can't do that.
I didn't say that. And if you did, suck it, Brendan and Jay. I'm just saying Ryan Duran sounds really good. All right.
Yeah.
Boy or girl.
Exactly. Either way.
I think that also too, this movie ends on a cliffhanger. We can talk about that in spoilers.
We will
towards the end. There's no way you cannot talk about that stuff, because it's absolutely hilarious, stupid, and then also kind of cool. If this is how they want to go, JD, if this is how they want to go out in these last two films, and I'm with you, I'm a little dubious that this will be the last two films, but if it is the last two at 12 pack,
At 12
right?
pack, yeah.
I'm in.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right.
Let's go.
Riot is in.
Roll me up, because I'm ready to drive with Dom and the fam.
Yeah.
Because it was a surprising fun time at the movie theaters.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it, and it certainly does sound like you enjoyed it a little bit more than me. However, this is one of those films that I think is hard to articulate in the moment, because, and we joke about it, the writing to this film is almost non-existent.
It's so stupid.
It's really dumb. I certainly do agree, but more than how obtuse it is, this movie is all set up. Like all set up.
It is.
I'll
give you that.
That's really all that it is. And it certainly, to me anyway, emphasizes or heightens other movies such as Avengers Infinity War, for example, which we knew that film was leading to a second parter, yet that film functions as a movie, has its own through lines, its own thematic heft to it that is almost separate from Endgame.
Yeah.
And so you think about those movies in comparison to this, and you're like, oh my God, like it just makes those movies and whatever flaws they may have of them, you think of those in such a higher light after watching a movie like Fast 10, at least from a storytelling perspective, because this is all set up regardless of which character you talk. And there are some characters here, like Jason Statham's character, for example, who was in the movie. Literally, he's a glorified cameo as a setup that is separate from what we get in the credits near the end of the film or the aforementioned cliffhanger. So like there's things like that throughout this film. Even Brie Larson's character feels like a glorified cameo to set up something that is about to come in the next two films. So that to me is also different from the last 9 films. I do feel like every other film leading up to this one, while yes, from a writing perspective, there's not much to them. They're often very dumb. The dialogue can be cringe at times, but I do think they kind of accept the triteness of the writing and in some ways lean into it to have some fun, but they kind of function within their own bubble. They do function as a movie where there's a plot, there's something simple to keep the plot moving, to keep characters motivated. Again, as thin as it is, it's there. It's at least there. Where here, again, it's almost non-existent because all we're really doing is setting up something that is to come later, aside from a few beats with Momoa's character. And even then it's again, very, very thinly veiled. However, I will say it's almost, as thin as it is regarding Momoa, I almost feel like it's one of the best elements of this film because I think about that opening sequence of the movie, which I think is actually really good in terms of how they're able to recontextualize that moment visually. It's one thing to just say that, oh, Momoa's character was there the whole time, even though we never see him in Fast 5. Like, visually speaking, the way they edit new footage with the footage from 2011 is very seamless. Yeah. It looks and functions as if we're actually rewatching Fast 5 with new angles and new shots and new characters involved in that sequence. So I think they do a really great job with all of that as far as giving credence to the idea of who this character is and why he would be fueled the way that he is. And then you couple that with Momoa's incredibly mesmerizing performance. So as thin as the writing is, as far as like we're contriving and shoehorning this character in as this menacing villain, I think it actually works very well. The other thing that's interesting about that moment as well, and I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but I wanted to quickly circle back to what we said earlier about Paul Walker and Brian and how his ghost, lingers over the course of this film. I think, given the nature of what happens in the climax of Fast 5, Brian is going to be involved in that sequence, right? And just seeing him on screen again, especially in this franchise, there is something just inherently poignant about that in and of itself. But they go a little bit beyond that. And again, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but we know that Paul Walker can't come back. Are they even going to bring Brian back at all? We don't really know. You could have just shot that sequence with a few glimpses of Paul Walker there to just inform the audience and as a reminder of Brian's participation in that sequence. You could have just left it at that, but they didn't. We hear dialogue from him. We hear him talk in that sequence. Mm-hmm. Again, like to give us that much, to remind us of who Brian is, his inclusion, and to actually have dialogue on screen. Am I reading too much into that? To me, just feels all the more that they want to bring him back in some way, shape, or form. I don't know, but that was kind of my interpretation of that choice. Otherwise, I don't know if it was necessary for us to hear the dialogue, to hear him talk, to remind us of who Brian was in this franchise. I don't know. It makes me wonder. And to me, that felt like an intentional choice of foreshadowing.
I think to your point, it's interesting because Momoa's character, what's his character's name again? JD, it escapes me. Dante. Right?
Yeah.
He is very much this is a revenge film. And they've had a couple of revenge films in this franchise for sure. Revenge has been on the mind before.
Mm-hmm. It's almost the element of every,
almost like fast revenge. You know what I mean?
Like it's literally, I'm pretty sure it's the motivating factor for all of them in some way, shape, or form.
Pretty much. I mean, like Furious 7 is a freaking revenge movie, essentially.
Yeah.
I think, and I think this is that when you think about it in that context, his anger is after Dom for obviously what happens to his father and what happens to him, right? But all parties involved, and we'll talk about all parties involved as we break this down, they have to be culpable for what's going on in this moment. This is such a pivotal moment for Dante. And look at me, like, you know, talking so serious about Fast and Furious. But no, it is, because that's his motivation to see to it that it's not just about killing Dominic Toretto. That has been like the thing that has driven me nuts about these. It's like, okay, yeah, everybody wants to kill Dom, and he's like Superman, and he figures it out, and blah 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 blah, whatever. This goes beyond. Like this is like, I kind of love that it's so petty. Like it's so like strip their bank accounts dry, assassinate and destroy or detain anyone that's ever like shared a tuna fish sandwich with them or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's so down to the detail. And you know, they've really, since I think it's Furious 7 when they introduced the God's Eye, right? So the sort of technology and really just kind of ramped up the stupid technology. And
not a contrivance at all.
No, it's really been something that like has hindered them so much, and something they should destroy, because it's a thing that's driven me like nuts. It's like Vin Diesel wanted an Infinity Stone and had to put it in his own damn thing, and it's really kind of killing his franchise. But the fact that like Dante's been able to sort of live in the shadows and build all this stuff and being able to know so much about every single aspect of it, it is quite a menacing, yet, you know, you have to take it with a grain of salt, idea of the fact that like, obviously I think that they are leading towards sort of Brian's return, like you're mentioning, JD. But I don't think that they are willing to get the audience there just yet. So they have to get this movie, which is Dom sort of in massive pain, the most vulnerable the family's ever been in this franchise. That's for sure by the end of this thing. Even though, you know, we all know it's, you know, they'll be fine. But
for sure.
But still the idea of it is like the words that are used, the actions that are done, sins of the original father of this sort of group, right, are now being used upon the latest father group, which is Dom. And then of course you have Dante, who has lost his father. So there's a lot of father-son dynamics that are, you know, or father-kid dynamics going on here. And I found that really interesting. I found the connection then too, you know, obviously the stuff with like Lil Brian and him there and Dominic there just kind of in the car and talking about it. It almost felt like you're talking about like a scene that maybe Brian would talk with his son about, you know what I mean? Or something that would feel like that. And then there's like the barbecue and you see that there's a seat there, right?
Yeah.
And there's a seat for him. And we know he's alive in the damn franchise because they mention him. He literally at the Fast 9 literally ends with him driving in like he just came home as a bank teller and just came home. I was like, hey, honey, I just finished my day. And it's
which you could have had a body in the seat. And you could have framed it in a way where we don't see his face.
This is my problem with the franchise. This is, and you're right, JD. They got a shit or get off the pot. This is the massive problem with the Fast and Furious franchise. Either decide you want to have Brian in this franchise, which honestly, it would be better if you did, because it makes Roman better, or at least tolerable. It makes Jordana Brewster actually function, in these things rather
She's
than
another glorified cameo here.
She's glorified
Another
cameos
setup.
at this
Yeah.
point. It makes Dom better as a father overall.
I mean,
So
that moment when he was talking about Brian to that, I forget the character's name, but the other woman driver in Brazil after the race, when he's like visiting her apartment and she says something about a street racer and a cop, right? Because it's revealed that it's revealed who her sister is, which I guess I don't need to reveal at this moment for spoiler reasons. But, something about that duality of a cop and a street racer. And there's a really fascinating close up on Vin Diesel. This is his best moment of acting in this film, when you get that close up of Vin Diesel and he reciprocates that idea of, I know what that's like. The relationship between a cop and a street racer, I very much empathize with that. You have no idea. Now, I'm paraphrasing there, but that's essentially what he says there. And you see the emotion on his face, and we all know who he's talking about in that moment. And to me, it's another one of those things where we see Brian at the beginning of this film. We hear his voice even. You get that moment of the barbecue, and you noted there's a glaring empty seat there, and we know who that is for there. And then you get that moment with Vin Diesel when he's talking very explicitly about Brian and getting emotional about it. Surely that they are leading to something, right? Or am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy, JD, because then you've got all the stuff with Jacob and everything, and it's about, and we can talk about that in spoilers or whatever, but the conclusion of that leads to then, like, okay, well, I can't even actually finish the sentence without spoiling it, so I'm not going to, but just to say that the stuff with Jacob ties into all this then too. And it's a mess. Just cast his brother, or I don't know, should have just cast John Cena as him. I don't freaking know. Like, cast Carl, who hasn't been in this franchise? It's kind of like who hasn't been in this franchise. So I'm trying to think, like, who had been a Paul Walker type. Get Timothy Oglefant or somebody. I don't know. Get anybody. He can get anyone to play this role. It's not like
his
Paul Walker.
Stunt double from the first movies.
Get his brother to play it.
Just get his brother. I mean, honestly, all joking aside, I think it's that simple.
It's that simple.
I think this film is clearly alluding to Brian constantly throughout the film.
He's coming.
And seemingly foreshadowing that he's going to come back at some point. And given the stakes of it, I mean, you think about that moment of Jordan Brewster's character in the house, and then Cena shows up. It's like, it feels like that should have been a moment where Brian is there, right?
So I'm not gonna lie. When that moment happened, I went, "Oh shit!"
I thought for a second,
back.
yeah,
right.
I thought for a second,
and then it was like Uncle Jacob, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." But here's the thing: it's like my cynical. I've worked with Jay Ledbetter for 5 years.
Yeah.
So my cynical heart would be like, of course they're going to do this. You know what I mean? It just makes sense for them to do this. But me, as like just a normal human being, would not like this to happen. Because if this happens, oh my God, if this happens, it's kind of worse than any uncanny valley thing that you could probably imagine, because of the fact that, like, so many uncanny valley things, they just end up doing it, and then it doesn't work out, and they never touch it again.
Well, I mean, and Star Wars has gotten in a lot of trouble for this.
True. But hear me out. They would have spent, because let's say he shows up in 12, all right? they would have spent 8, 9, 10, 11, 4 movies of just the most random assortment of scripts that you could have ever done and put themselves in so many rabbit holes and pigeonholed themselves in so many different ways. And then if it ends up working out in the final one, then you question everything that comes beforehand. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, is this worth this? And for my listeners, I'm putting up my 4 biggest fingers, and then the 12th one is the smallest finger on my hand. Because by then, does it matter to your story? Does it matter to your characters? Do you even care about that anymore? It's so weird to have like, it's sort of juxtaposed, like you care so much. And this whole thing is built on family and everything is family, 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 family. But the number one thing about this family, and it's like losing, when we lost Vin Diesel in after the first one, it lost a little something, right? With Fast 2. And that movie's just bad in general, but you know, whatever. But it still had Paul Walker. And he's still, say what you want about Paul Walker as an actor, he was always good as Brian. Like he was just built for that character. He just knew it, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it would just, it just doesn't, the franchise hasn't felt all the way right. So it has to take itself to these ridiculous heights in order to justify now these soap operas about Vin Diesel and being a father and, you know, family and all these different things and bringing back every character. And that's the thing, is that every character has been brought back except who? The one that technically is still alive in your franchise.
And that's fascinating or tragic irony of all of this, because you're right. And I don't know, maybe we should just at this point just note that we might get into some spoilers for the rest of this conversation. So just a fair warning for those that haven't seen Fast X, because yes, not just this film, other films have brought back others that have supposedly died. And then at the end of this film, they bring back a character that,
well, you can say it.
Hilariously enough, like on the main show this last weekend on 534, one of my trivia questions was, you know, who was the main character that died in Fast and Furious? Was it 6?
6. Yeah.
Giselle dies? Nope. Turns out that trivia question is all mute because she is back now. Like, if you've died in this franchise, you've come back.
Now, I want a like serious question here before we even dive into more in that. Okay. So I think you can kind of justify Han, like, you know, maybe he had like a flame suit or something.
He blew up in a car, Ryan.
I don't know. I'm trying to tell you.
He blew up in a car.
Okay.
How do you justify that?
Okay, fair. But she flew out of a car that was going an ungodly amount of like speed, right?
Yeah.
No, she wasn't even in a car.
Didn't she fall off the plane?
She fell off the plane, right? Because she was trying to get in and she had to jump off the plane and shoot something and killed herself. She would be roadkill. There's no freaking way she's alive. So that's
it makes no sense.
The only way that I can even think that these people are alive, JD, is that obviously, like, wasn't it like Han and Mr. Nobody or something like that, or like it was some
they
sort of connection?
sort of explained it away, but it was
right?
all confusing.
So it can only mean that, like, we see in this movie, like Letty has like a stab wound or whatever, and it's like put together.
They patch her up in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, like it can only justify that, like, the agency keeps bringing these people back to life. Yeah. But then it makes absolutely no freaking sense that if then the agency keeps bringing these assholes back to life, then why are you so stupid enough to then, I don't know, put them back on the terrorist most wanted lists and think that these guys now are so dangerous? It's so silly. Yeah, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I want to preface this. I had fun with this, but there are fundamental problems with the story of this thing, because there is no damn story to this thing. It's so convoluted, and you're right, JD. It's a lot of setup. Now, does that mean I still
hold
didn't
on.
have a fun
Before we
time?
move on, I kind of want to circle it back to. I want to finish that conversation.
What about Brian? Okay,
about Brian, because the reason I wanted to bring Giselle up now is to emphasize your point that we've brought back Han, we've brought back Giselle, even though he didn't die. They had the feud, but Hobbs is coming back now.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Oh, spoiler alert.
I'm just kidding. I don't think no, we already spoiled it. But yeah, at the end, which was actually
every character, literally all of them have come back.
Letty
came back from the dead. So yes, all of these 3 or 4 characters have quote unquote died and come back. And in the case of Hobbs, he left the franchise. He came back. Brian has been around from the beginning. He's literally never left. But the last 3 films, obviously with the tragedy of Paul Walker, it certainly makes the decision-making behind this all the more tricky and nuanced. And I certainly do comprehend that. But we're at a point now, especially given the story and how they've built up these characters, to your point, they're at a crossroads and they need to decide. Are they going to utilize this character or just keep his ghost there as some sort of reminder of the character? Or are you actually going to do something about it? And it feels like they're pointing toward doing something about it. But I don't know. I don't know if all of the illusion and all of the foreshadowing is necessary if there isn't a payoff. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. But there is a fascinating irony that he's the one that they haven't brought back yet. And he's been around the whole time. He's literally never left.
Yeah, I mean, it's this weird, thing that Diesel just doesn't want to tap into. But it's like, you don't want to tap into it, but you're tapping into it, bro.
He's tapping into it.
It's like you're just edging everybody along. You know what I mean? It's just like just commit and get in bed with it, baby. It's just
agree.
okay. It's fine.
To me, that's when he's at his best performatively too. I mean, that moment in Brazil when he's talking about Brian is by far his best moment in this film from an acting perspective.
But also
he's very good.
JD, the best acting of this entire series are moments in Fast 5 when it's him and Brian.
Yeah.
When they're talking outside, when Dom's talking about his father and all that different stuff, and about Brian becoming a dad and all these different things. It's a good movie because the two of them exist. And the reason why Roman is such an insufferable character now, since Paul Walker has died, even more so than what he was before, is because Paul Walker was there to roast the hell out of him. He brought a balance to all of this that you just cannot measure. And even if it is just the idea of writing the character is one thing, because you have to write these characters and you have to put them in. So I think that writing it is one thing, performing it obviously is another. But does the character, writing the character and putting that in the film, the mindset, the values, the balance that he provides so much of this group. Yes, it is necessary. Yeah. Is it sad that he's not going to be there? Yes, but you can have that character there. And I've always been the proponent of this, JD. You know this. I've always been a proponent of the character is bigger than the performer, because we've seen so many. If I've seen 700 Spider-Man and 900 Batman and
James Bond,
I can see somebody recasting this freaking movie. I can see another person doing it. So I
agree.
It's precious to us, but do you think, but honestly, when you think about it, do you really think they would have said, you know what? I don't want you to ever use my character ever again. It's mine. I'm taking it to the grave. Kick rocks, and I hope you try to figure it the fuck out
I don't
dead.
think
would
he
do
would have
that.
said,
Come
I don't
on.
think so either. Especially given, as we all know, the themes of family around these films, and he's such a vital piece to it. He's part of the nucleus that to just have him as a ghostly presence, given where they're going,
weird.
seemingly, it just makes sense to bring him back. And I recasting him makes sense. I think it would benefit the franchise. And then you don't have to just awkwardly allude to the character.
Yeah.
And also you avoid the uncanny valley of CGI, whether it be on an actor or AI, and God forbid we get the latter of those two options. Just recast somebody, someone that can, channel Paul Walker, but obviously bring their own, ethos to the character. And I think to have Brian physically be a part of these last two movies, to me, I think that would, it would give credence to the foreshadowing, to everything that we've seen in the last few. And I think it would just heighten a lot of those central themes that is the foundational element of this franchise.
And the last thing on that, I think what it would also do for you, as well as myself and many other people. And the reason why I think it would then allow itself to probably be A, relevant, and B, get a lot more money here in the domestic, because it's become more of an international sort of flavor, these films. It would then be, I think, an actual legitimate step into legitimacy of closure.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that if you're not going to use these last two movies, which would be, if you're doing 12 of them, that's 5 out of 12 would not, not even 5 out of 12. It would be half, because he's not in Tokyo Drift. So you would use half the films to not even touch on one of the most important characters in this franchise.
Yeah.
I call bullshit on that.
No,
I do.
I agree.
I call BS on that. You know what I mean?
I'm with you. I hope that that's the route they go. And it does seem, regardless of execution or regardless of which avenue they take, Fast 10 at the very least is heavily, undoubtedly alluding to Brian coming back in some way. Yeah. Either way. So it's just something to keep an eye on. I do want to transition the conversation though, because, I do find all of that fascinating about Paul Walker and the Brian character and how he is a part of this movie. Yeah. However, we need to talk about Jason Momoa, because he, as I noted at the beginning of this conversation, is really the beginning and end of the entire conversation. He is incredible in this film. I found him so enthralling here.
I want to talk about Jason Momoa, but are you sure you don't want to talk about Pete Davidson and weed muffins?
Well, I did love that Han got to have his little snack, and then it led to that little gag there, I guess. But
it was that, but then he also had a snack, and Jason Statham, I almost said Jason Momoa, Jason Statham kicked it out of his hand, and it's like, oh man, I was about to eat that. That was a good moment. I like that. That was pretty good. I like Han because he's like Brad Pitt. They eat in films. Actors should eat in films.
I agree.
Eating in films is good.
Yeah.
Unless it's like The Whale, I don't want to see that. That's a one-time thing.
That's an addiction movie. Well, we've already talked about that.
Or
at any rate,
or Green Book, I don't want to see somebody eat a whole calzone pizza like that. It's a lot. Anyway,
what about Matilda eating an entire chocolate cake?
Listen, that's a kid's count? I know that movie seems like that's a nightmare, but that's like a kid's it's like a wish a kid would make with a genie. Come on.
I feel like that. I'm not like a huge sweets person like my wife is. That scenario
that is
I
terrifying
think would
for
be
you?
Nightmarish for me.
But if I gave you a whole lasagna, would you be able to eat that?
Oh, now that I could do. Yeah.
Seeing, what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
that's
whole, something.
I was trying to think of a casserole, and I'm like, everybody loves lasagna. If you don't like lasagna,
there's
InSession Film brought to you by lasagna.
Brought to you by lasagna. And anyway, Momoa is a snack in this film.
He's an absolute octopus.
Incredible.
I want to say up front that Jay and I, we are part of the Jason Momoa fan base. We've been this way for many years on the InSession Film Podcast. We've been this since a little movie called Aquaman. And we've been the high defenders of the high sea for many, many years of that movie. Also directed by James Wan, who directed Furious 7. So there you go.
Yeah. Which Momoa was not in.
Which he wasn't in, but he should have been.
Yeah.
I just think that like there's an unpredictability to Dante. It's just so great to see, like, and it's all these, he's devilish. It's dark in the humor, the way he portrays it. Like, you know, the fact that he's just like, oh yeah, I've kidnapped all the Charlize Theron's henchmen families and everything. Like, join me, otherwise they'll all be dead.
Just having fun with it, yeah.
And it's all game to him.
That scene with the two tech guys that he had just murdered and taped up, it's somewhat of a gruesome visual.
Painting their nails.
It's so funny.
My mouth was on the floor because I was like, wow. Because honestly, JD, that's different.
Yeah, that's very different.
For all the stuff that's in this movie that is very much like the last couple movies, and it's like so stupid. Like I mentioned the Pete Davidson stuff, or even the Letty Cypher fight that happens for no fucking reason why that fight should happen. It's so stupid.
It's mundane.
But every moment in this movie that is balanced out with something like that has a great moment from Momoa.
Yeah.
And so it's like the movie ultimately, it's like, yeah, I would take some of this stuff out, but also if I have to watch all of that to get to this, I'm kind of worth it. I mean, it's kind of worth it because he's giving something in here at this franchise that's like, okay, if he's going to be like this for the next 2 movies, if I'm going to have this type of unpredictability, you know, and him and Don playing this chess match for the next 2 movies, right? I'm kind of game for it because it's finally somebody that's thinking like Dominic Toretto, a little bit of like, break the rules, have fun with it. I don't have a family. I don't have a rule book. I just have chaos, and I have bombs and a cool tech and awesome outfits. And I'm just gonna you know, get back what you stole from me. And I'm gonna do it in such a like mustache twirling fun way. Like Momoa just like, I feel like because this production had so many problems. We didn't even mention that. Like Justin Lin leaving, we mentioned it a little bit, but like it's the reason why this movie's $340 million to make when they're usually like 250 or 200 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the delays. There supposedly was like a big there was supposedly a big action set piece that was supposed to take place in the Ukraine that they had to change at the last second. Yeah. And everything. So that all aside, and a director change, that's never good. But whatever they were doing to change all that, either they didn't have time or they just said keep going there because they at least found something with Momoa to keep tapping back to. And he's in the majority of this movie. So
he's
that
in it
means
a lot, yeah.
So with him being in the majority of the movie, that means that he's propelling the unpredictability. And you as a Fast and Furious viewer are expecting Dom to turn on him or to flip the switch or to one up him or trick him or, you know, whatever. It just doesn't happen. And I commend that to this to this movie.
I agree. And I think what's interesting about Momoa, you know, earlier I was noting that this film comparatively to others of its ilk or that are working as, you know, an initial beginning to some sort of end. This film is much more uneven comparatively to others. But similarly, I think Momoa's performance here, you know, it's heightened when you compare it to something like John Cena, as you noted in F9. And I really do like John Cena. Do not get me wrong. But I think it's become clear that he was perhaps miscast or misused in the last film. because what he does here, I think, is very good. As we noted, they effectively utilize his charm. But what we've come to see with Momoa, because we've seen him be Aquaman, we've seen him be the good guy, so to speak. With his performance here, it goes to show the kind of range that he has compared to others. Because, my God, this is unlike anything I've seen with Momoa previously. And he does such an incredible job. You know, earlier we were talking about, you know, the thin writing of these movies and how trite and hollow it tends to be. That doesn't have to be a bad thing necessarily. What I love about Momoa's character here is that the writing is incredibly simple. It is as simple as it gets, right? We get the opening action sequence, recall to Fast Five, where we come to learn that he was the son of the Reyes character, I believe. Was that his name in Fast Five? The central villain of that film? I'm trying to remember. So he was the son of Reyes. His father is, of course, killed, as we come to see in Fast Five, which they reiterate in the opening scene of this film. And that's it. That's all we need as a motivating factor. And then Momoa does the rest performatively to take advantage of that. And in every scene of this film, he is genuinely unsettling. He is menacing in this film. He has an actual heft in terms of the villainous presence, which we don't always get in these films. I feel like the heels of these movies are often just there to thrust plot forward, so our characters have action and things to do to save the world, so to speak. We're here, it feels like there's something actual at stake, and that almost exclusively comes through in that unsettling nature in Momoa's performance, but simultaneously, he's incredibly hilarious. He's so funny and just taps into this goofiness that I just absolutely love. So in one breath, he is simultaneously laugh out loud, hilarious, and in the very next moment doing something that is really dark and bleak. And he somehow finds a way to meld that together. It is truly an incredible performance. I am so glad we're going to get to see more of him, whether it be in the next one or especially in 12 as they kind of round things out here. But as, I guess, the main baddie, the Thanos of you will, to kind of end this franchise, I don't think they could have hit the nail on the head any harder. Like he was impeccable here. He was easily the best thing about this film. And to me, as I noted earlier, I think he's exactly what this franchise needed at this time.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's incredible in this movie, but then there's some other stuff that happens in this movie.
There is other stuff. What other stuff you want to talk about?
I got to tell you about the quite possibly the dumbest thing I've seen in this franchise.
Which is saying something. That's saying a lot.
It's dumb because I felt stupid in the moment. And, you know, JD, I think of myself as a pretty smart guy. Mm-hmm. You're a pretty smart guy. Jay's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
Now that the contracts fits between all of us and I can back here, you know, to talk about Fast and Furious, Brendan's is a pretty smart guy too. Sorry, Brendan. It's just part of the bit. There's a scene in this movie that I had to think back as the movie was playing. Does that make any sense at all? And did I miss something from my eyeballs that set this up moments before? And maybe I did. Maybe listeners can put something in the bottom. But it's after the bomb goes off in Rome, right?
Yes. Okay.
No casualties, by the way. Thanks, Zack Snyder.
Minimal. I think he says minimal casualties.
Thanks, Zack Snyder. You know, ever since Man of Steel, now you can have as many explosions as you want. You kill a couple people like lose their goddamn minds.
How could you not laugh at a line like that though? Like
minimal casualties,
like all the crashing, all of the fire. You know, there's that moment.
Yeah,
where...
there's like one guy in a hospital with a shin bruise. You know what I mean? Like, You know what I mean?
Unbelievable.
Like,
yeah.
But it is it's a shot of Dom looking at this burned city.
Uh-huh.
And then camera pans left a little
Uh-huh.
and a little back. And Helen Mirren just walks in the frame.
Another cameo, right? That's another one of those cameos. Setup. Cameo.
Can you tell me and I'm sorry for the language, but how the fuck she got there? And like when he had time to call her and how time has passed and how he could like it. This is literally after everything happened. Literally after everything just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he's already got her there. And I'm like, how fast is her car? Like, how did she like? It didn't make any sense. And I just was like, okay, this movie is. That's when I knew. Okay, this movie wants to just drop people wherever the hell they want conveniently.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about it even remotely making sense. And because like even in like the last one when she was in London trying to steal something and they ran into one another,
Mm-hmm.
like okay, that makes sense. He kind of like has a intel where that they could find her, use God's eye. He doesn't have God's eye. You know what I mean? He doesn't have that. He doesn't have that tech. You know what I mean? So, or do they? Does he?
No,
they don't.
Because it was Brie Larson's character has the God's eye.
Well, she steals it from Jack Reacher, dude. But like Scott Eastwood's not using it because they like stopped.
Also, cameo. He never came back after that explosion, did he?
No, he just kind of. I guess he's in hospital. I guess he's one of the casualties.
He was the one with the bruised shin, right?
Yeah, no, it's more like a broken fibula. It's like poor guy is going to be locked up there for the next film.
I genuinely forgot he was in this until you noted that. Like he's in the movie for 2.5 minutes.
I literally forgot he was in the franchise until he showed up, and I went, "Oh, that's right. He's like Kurt Russell's son," which is an insult to Kurt Russell. But which. That's the other one. He's not dead. He's just missing. It's like Nick Fury on a vacation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, which is exactly what Mr. Nobody is essentially. But I just thought that was really stupid. I'm done with Tyrese Gibson in this franchise. We can just stop it. Like Luda, great. Ramsey, fine. She and Luda got great chemistry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The actress's name escapes me that plays Ramsey. I think it's Emmanuel.
Natalie.
Natalie. Yeah.
Emmanuel, something like that.
Yeah. Natalie Emmanuel. And then of course my boy Han. Like I love them. Like if everyone in that explosion at the end of the movie, if those three live and Tyrese dies, worth it. Worth it.
Well, and
because,
that's another thing, right?
Damn it, is he so annoying in this movie? God, he's got to stop talking at all. It's just the dialogue and him. Stop. You know,
I mean, I think that's fair. I don't mind Tyrese Gibson as much in these movies. I mean, he's a one note actor, but I think he's fine here. And maybe it's just because of the camaraderie he has with Tej and these other characters here, you know, and he's also not in the film a ton.
It is,
but
like
I don't mind him.
I don't know. It's just like
He's so fine.
One note, and they haven't evolved him.
It's not great.
They've evolved all those other characters, though.
That's true. He's the only one that is the same from the last ones all the way through.
It's like, and what was kind of good about him in the last one was like he started becoming self-aware. He's like, guys, I think we can die. Like, kind of.
I actually really like that.
I'm kind of like scared shitless at the idea that we're never gonna die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I actually did like that gag.
And I'm like, oh, they're like Roman's gonna like wake up from like, you know, and like realize that like none of this is normal. Like he keeps saying that, like none of this is normal.
Yeah,
Like
we
he's
fought a
breaking it
tank.
down.
We fought a
It's
submarine.
actually like great, but then he takes such a regression in this movie.
I
That, like
mean,
those sections are so driven by him because he's got the money and he's the quote unquote leader and everything. So they are driven by him. I would
and I think to that point where the next two films, he could end up having that evolution that you're seeking from the character, because he does transition from the, you know, I guess the myopic nature of that character and how he's defined himself to be in these movies. And because he was trying to lead that mission that goes awry, which, as we come to find out, wasn't his fault. The entire team was being trapped, but he does take responsibility for it. And he has that moment with Tej in the plane, and, you know, where it seems as if there was a glimpse of maturity with the character, at least for a brief moment. And then the plane crashes, which, as this franchise has done repeatedly, they're of course going to survive said plane crash somehow.
Listen, I watched an entire television show about a plane crashing, and half the plane went on one island and half of the plane went on the other.
Yeah.
So just because it
maybe
crashes into a mountain, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. People survive.
I'm more of a belief that they survived that than John Cena surviving whatever happened there. But
I also believe he survived that.
I believe wholeheartedly he figured out a way. He was like,
he figured come hell or high water.
He had his
Peacemaker
peacemaker suit on, and he survived. He's John.
Well,
Cena.
I do want to speak to that here in a moment as well. But to conclude that thought on Roman, like, you know, they're going to survive that plane crash, and because of said moment in the plane before the crash, if they are to continue that, and that is a big if, because the writing for these movies are a non-thought.
You are asking for
I'm asking for a lot, I know. But if they are to continue that trend or continue that, you know, that trajectory, then into 11 and 12, perhaps there'll be a little bit more of an evolution there with the character. But you know, that we'll see. I do want to speak to that moment though with the Jacob character.
Yeah.
To me, you know, earlier you were mentioning that moment in Rome with Helen Mirren and how the hell does that happen? And the logic just doesn't add up. Although this is convenience the movie. Fast 10, we are full of contrivances and coincidences.
Why is it that like you and I can sit through this movie though and be like, yeah, okay. But like other movies, you and I are like, this garbage thing, you know, and it's just because this is more built in its ridiculousness. It's
absurd. Like I am not necessarily overlooking those contrivances. Those are absolutely criticisms I have. But with these films, they're there. Absolutely, they're there. I mean, in every turn, these characters just happen to be at the right place at the right time. Yeah, it's amazing how that works.
They've never missed an appointment.
They're
always right there when their delivery is ready.
Exactly. Incredible how that works.
Some of us are sitting at home for like 2 hours. So like, I'm like, when is the Time Warner cable guy coming over here? And they're there perfectly. You know what I'm saying?
Dom would show up at the right moment when that happened. Right there. Yeah.
They're like, I can squeeze in a couple other things because I know they'll be there right when I want them to be.
Right when exactly. So, you know, with this franchise, you just have to accept that. If you're going to enjoy them in any way, shape, or form, you just have to accept that's how these films function.
Yeah, if you're looking for like a Killers of the Flower Moon sort of mentality to this, you really just kind of set yourself up to fail.
Exactly. But see, and this brings me to this moment with Jacob at the end of the film, which I just find so, I don't know if frustrating is the right word. Maybe it's just funny, or it's something that I certainly took note of, because how many times in these films has there been an action franchise or an action sequence, where there are henchmen, there are vehicles with people in them, and we have no idea who they are. Right? All they are is cannon fodder for Dom and his team to get from the beginning of the sequence to the end where they escape and everything is hunky dory. So that has happened countless times. That's how these films function, right? So here comes a moment where Jacob is facing off, or he sees said henchman coming toward Dom. And instead of doing what they have done in all of these movies, where he just figures out a way to get them out of the path and then they both kind of screw around. No, that's not what's going to happen. Instead, we're going for the ultimate sacrifice. We're throwing a Hail Mary when it is second and goal. It kind of makes no sense for him to just completely sacrifice himself with the ultimate sacrifice when he has rockets attached to his gun. All he has to, or to his car, all he has to do is point his car at the direction of these guys, hit the trigger, and he's got rockets he can shoot at them. But no, we can't do that. We have to flip the car over the highway and crash and explode to defeat henchmen that in none of these movies they've had to go to that extreme. To me, it's just so silly. It almost breaks their own rules. It breaks their own rules of this franchise and how they've established it to be. I think to me, that's what makes it so silly and it kind of blows my mind. I don't think we had to go that far. You know what I mean? There's no reason to hold a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
We're 5 yards from the goal line.
Don't call it Pete Carroll move.
Don't do a Pete Carroll. Yeah. There's no need. Yeah.
No, I mean, you're right. And also,
rockets.
if I was those henchmen, I'd be like, dude, we're just a club. We're going to work. We're not gonna kill your friend. And that's what it kind of felt like. No, obviously they're bad guys.
Every one of these movies, they would have found a way. They would have, The Rock kicked a torpedo to kill one of these guys for crying.
Brian would have found a way.
Brian would have found a way.
Pretty low, Jacob. You know what I mean? No, but it was.
Let's kill ourselves over henchmen.
Well, I mean, just for this movie, Jay, he'll be back next week.
Yeah, and that's again, and that's why it's also silly and it's fun, and I joke about it because he is for sure going to survive that crash, no doubt about it.
Also, too, I mean, Cena with the kid was the second best part of this movie.
It was good. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah,
that's why I was kind of pissed that they introduced this character in the last movie, didn't really do a good job with him. Come back in this movie, do a great job with them, in my opinion. Because it taps into Cena's comedic, sensitivities and and then they're like, nope, we're just gonna shoot a behind the back half court buzzer beater when we're up by 40. You know what I mean? And that's how we're gonna end the game. It's you guys could you could draw up a better play. It's the end of the season here.
Well, and it's also hilarious too, because moments before the little kid realizes that the rockets are jammed. So he gets out of the car, gets to the back as they're speeding down this highway, and he fixes the jam. So the rockets are now usable. Now that becomes a crux for Momoa to steal the kid and for the plot to continue. But then the film just does not utilize that. You think that from a writing perspective, and perhaps the writers' strike started as, years ago for these guys as they were writing this movie. because, because you would think that they would come back to that.
It started around Furious 8.
And look, I don't mean to make light of that situation because that is a dark situation for those writers, and God bless them. And
I mean, they can't they haven't been able to pay the rent for 5 movies. You know what I mean?
But I mean, because you just why, aside from putting the kid in a vulnerable position, I guess to get
wouldn't
kidnapped.
he have backed up the car in a way on the side of the road or something where he could time it perfectly? Or if he shoots the one in the front, they all, how in the Mad Max Fury Road, if you hit the one car, it's like bowling. Why couldn't that fucking work. Like,
Like,
that doesn't make any sense.
Like they set it up perfectly where, okay, the kid fixes the thing, and then but also simultaneously it puts him in a position for Momoa to steal him. Okay, fine. We got to build up drama and suspense. I get it. But we also have now come to realize that the cannons now work. The rockets work because the kid fixed it. So it just makes sense from a storytelling perspective. Like, oh yeah, we have these. We can use these now. So let's just shoot the rockets at the guys coming in down.
All I know is that poor Rita Moreno's just sitting there waiting for the barbecue to start, and everybody's dead. You know what I mean? So
dead.
you know what?
Oh,
Do you
God.
think that the agency had to grab Rita Moreno because this is like the first time she's been in the movies, and she just came over for a barbecue, and now she's like kind of screwed now too? Like, do you think that like that happened? Like, imagine Rita Moreno, who just comes and says that weirdly nice speech, and then like consoles Vin Diesel in the most awkward scene of the movie, and then like they're like, we're coming after anyone that's ever associated with Dominic Toretto. You think she's like at her like Best Western or wherever she's staying at, and like the door just gets kicked into the grabbing Rita Moreno and throwing her on black site somewhere? You know what I mean? Like, think about that episode of a movie that I want to find out. Like, you know what I mean?
Maybe that's the next movie. Maybe that's
I'm
the plot of
telling
the next
you,
one.
You know what would have been great is like if Rita Moreno would have showed up to like with her own grenade launcher sort of car to like kill all those other ones. Like, why did you have her in this if she's not going to do anything? Like, why do you have
there's all kinds of cameos.
Helen
this
Mirren
is cameo
if she's
the
not
movie.
gonna do anything? Like, Brie Larson is just I feel like someone needs to ask if Brie Larson wants to be in a good movie again, because like her agent must just really hate her because she's just so nothing in this movie, man. And again, the stuff between Letty and Charlize Theron, it's just so throwaway, and then it's like gone. They're gone for like an hour and a half of this movie, and then they come back at the end, and that's how you end it, with like Gal Gadot sipping a hot chocolate out of that submarine that they mentioned. She's like, "Hey guys, I got enough hot chocolate here to fill denial." You know what I mean? And it's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then, I mean, I did know the post-credit scene because the Wrap spoiled it 3 days before I saw the damn movie.
That was so dumb. Yeah.
Son of a bitch. But the scene itself I thought was pretty cool, the way it was set up and everything.
Yeah.
It still also contractually means that Vin Diesel and The Rock were not in the same room when that had to be shot. So we'll see how that turns out for the rest of these movies.
I was going to say, surely that's going to have to change for the next two.
Gonna have to change. Not even like a little bit. Like, it's gonna have to change. So that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's interesting. Like, The Rock can't lose a fight. Vin Diesel can't lose a fight. Jay Statham lose a fight. Those are all in the contracts. They'll all be on the same team. They're gonna morph like a transformer together and just create one
the
giant
Power Rangers
Hulk.
That's what you're thinking.
Yeah,
of.
it's
The
like
Power
they're
Rangers Megazord.
Yeah, they're gonna be some sort of Megazord fighting Jason Momoa with his like long stringy hair. Give me some weird shit.
I can't wait for that.
But honestly, it was like I was kind of happy to see Hobbs back, because I was like, good, because Hobbs is good, and like when Statham was in it, he was good. And these are good actors and good action stars, not some random, like, really respected actors that you want to do, but like, you're an action movie. Be an action movie. Have action stars. Do what you did. I mean, like, Fate of the Furious isn't a good movie, but the pieces there of that cast is good enough. Like, Statham and The Rock are good enough with the original core to just take on Jason Statham. I don't need the Helen Mirrens of the world to just show up for 5 minutes, because it's honestly wasting their talents. And like, I get Brie Larson was a fan of the film, of the series, and wanted to be in it, so it's like cool. But I'm sure her and Kurt Russell will have a great scene in the next film or something. Be like, I want to push the button, Dad, or something like that. I don't know. I want to play with God's Eye now. But
yeah. Speaking of, what did you think of Jack Reacher, dude? Did you like Jack Reacher in this movie?
I tell you this, he's too much. I mean,
the twist at the end.
For me,
oh
listen, it's one thing for me to be the sexiest man alive. It's another thing when you see someone trying to come and take my title. You know what I mean? No,
Sure.
honestly, I think he's kind of like one of those like nothing guys. You know what I mean? Does nothing for me. Like, I always thought it was funny. People got mad that like Tom Cruise played Jack Reacher, and I'm like, I don't know. I kind of find it like an oxymoron. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's like you wouldn't think this little guy here that's like 5'1" could beat the hell out of you, and he does. But like he's very wooden, and so like putting him opposite of Momoa going forward, yikes. Like
not looking forward to that.
It does remind me a little bit of like Batman Forever. And then like Momoa could be giving like this crazy performance. Meanwhile, you've got like Tommy Lee Jones completely disinterested, right? You know what I mean? In that movie,
Sure.
right? So like this wooden kind of like performance there. Mixed with like the Carrie Momoa, like it's crazy shit, going on. So maybe that's what they're going for, but I can tell you this going forward. Do not introduce a single new character. Stop it.
Well, I agree. Like I talked about this last week on episode 534. I think maybe the biggest culprit of this franchise in the last two films, and it is very much felt here as well, is that there's too much going on in terms of plot, and you cannot maintain that pace with 1,500 different characters. There's just too many characters and too many things going on here. Like they want this to be some sort of Avengers level movie, but they don't. There's no room to balance all of that here. We joked about it earlier, but there's genuinely 4 or 5 glorified cameos, and then there's 2 genuine cameos at the end of this film. Like, there's just too much, and that doesn't even include Brian's ghost that just kind of haunts this movie as well. There's just too much going on, too many characters to keep up with everything, and especially because they want to have an action set piece every 8 minutes. It feels like. I mean, that might be hyperbole, but it's probably not too far off from that. Like, it feels like they have to have an action set piece every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. Like, to me, that's what makes the moments when the film slows down, I think, all the more compelling. Like the best scenes of this film for me are, that moment we mentioned earlier of Momoa with the tech guys after he had killed them, because that's a really fun character moment where he really gets to play and have a ton of fun. Or I think of Dom talking to I gotta find the character's name.
You're talking about like the girl who is
she's the
name? Gosh, why don't
Isabel. Isabel is her name.
She's played by the girl that was in the Suicide Squad. She was Ratcatcher.
Yeah, and it's revealed that she is the sister of Dom's former girlfriend, who was the police officer and Brian kind of the partner to Hobbs in the previous movies.
Well, JD, you didn't mention that makes her family.
That makes her family. Well, and that to me is what makes that moment great, because he talks about how he recognized her immediately. And then they have that exchange I mentioned earlier of being a street racer and having a relationship with a cop, and how that, resonates for the both of them. Like, that's a genuine movie that I think is a genuine moment that is very good in this movie. And so to me, like, as much as I like the bombastic action of these movies. And this film specifically has some interesting set pieces. But I almost feel like the best parts of this movie, because it's moving at 1,000 miles an hour and there's 1,000 set pieces here, that the best moments are when it slows down to take a breath and let these characters kind of, evoke some sort of feeling, whether it be the emotion of Dom and Isabel in that moment, or the fun of Momoa, or even some of the levity we get with Han and Roman and Tej and those characters. Like, I at least like when there's some personality in this film. And to me, the best parts of that here are kind of in between the set pieces. Mm-hmm. So, I just maybe wanted a little bit more of that, or less set pieces, emphasize the characters. And, because that's what 5, 6, and 7 did so well. You got all of the set pieces, you got the action, but they balanced that well with characters and kind of evolving them in some sort of way. Yeah. This to me it really misses the mark in that regard. Yeah. Is it better than 7 or 8 and 9, to your point earlier? I don't know if that's the case for me, but I can certainly hear that argument. I think this is at least better than 9, but I might like 8 a little bit more. I don't really know. But this is a movie that, to the first sentence I said at the beginning of this conversation, it might just become a better movie for me once 11 and 12 come out and I have context to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, all right. Do you have any concluding thoughts here on Fast 10?
Yes, I would like to read the lyrics of Vin Diesel's top charting hit. Okay. Feel Like I Do. Okay. If I am permitted, no, I'm not going to read that. Just go. Come on. Though it is a bop, and everyone should listen to it. It's actually like if Groot sang a song, it would. Nice. It's freaking wild. All right. It's well right. I will say this, that I don't know who directs the next two, but if I could make a suggestion. If you can't get Justin Lin back, can we get either F. Gary Gray, who did Fate of the Furious, and I thought his direction was fine. I just didn't think the story was great. Mm-hmm. But if we could get James Wan back, that'd be super duper. Mm-hmm. Because outside of Justin Lin, James Wan, outside of John Singleton, James Wan's the best director to step behind the wheel of this franchise. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing about that he was able to capture too was emotionality. And he's great about big action set pieces, emotionality. Work with Momoa before on the Aquaman movies, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that would be really beneficial to him. Also, thought about it just off the top of my head. Speaking of Aquaman, Patrick Wilson, he'd be a good Brian. Just putting that out there. Yeah. But ultimately, and this is just the truth. This movie is stupid. There is a lot of stupid action. JD's right. It depends on how much you're willing to give yourself. I mean, there's a Pete Davidson cameo, for Christ's sake. There's a guy that Statham's beating up in a punching bag. There's
what was that?
Roman took the job in Rome because they're in Rome. Like that's the level of idiocracy,
which leads to a Roman noodles joke.
Yes, which is, God, if there was ever a gun needed in a theater for me, it was just, I was so like, God damn it. I was about to leave. I was so close.
It's so dumb.
I was so close. I was like, oh God, this movie cannot be this for another 2.5 hours.
And it is.
But between all I've just kind of given up, like the action, the cars, and the way, like, things operate and how they, like, when he's like, you're at the end of the line, Dom. And he's like, you forgot one thing. You shouldn't have you should have taken my car. And he like drives off the cliff with his son. I was kind of like, sure. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I was like, sure. And I was like, go all the way.
But
You know
that's
what
the
I mean?
absurdity I like about this
I like
franchise.
it, though.
When it
You know what I
accepts when it embraces its insanity. That's,
yeah, I mean,
that's when
like
it's
you and I
good.
are on very much on board since like Furious 6, where he just like jumps.
Yeah,
across
once he
highway.
Superman's across the highway, different ball game.
I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? God, I love this franchise. And I really do. I loved it, and I just think that these movies are so stupid, and they don't try to take themselves too serious. Even though I think at times they do, and it's a weird balance. And I don't think they're going to work for everybody all the time. Like, like 8 didn't work for me all the way. 9 didn't work for me all the way, though. I liked it a little bit more than 8. And I like this one a little bit more because it does have a little bit more, has a little bit more juice, a little bit more Nas in the film, if that makes sense, JD. So, I mean, I still would probably give this like a B-, you know what I mean? Or, or C+, because there's a lot of problems with it. But it was definitely like what I would expect from a good Fast and Furious movie, because even in the good ones, there's still logical kind of things that are, like you got the Superman jumps or cars are going through buildings and stuff, you know what I mean? Or they're taking 2 cars and dragging a giant vault behind them. Like, you've got to take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. But it's just about how much sodium you'd like in your count on the day you see these movies now.
Yeah.
And mine was a little bit, I was a good boy, ate a lot of vegetables throughout the week. So I could afford to have that really big ham steak, which that
Fair
is
enough.
this movie.
Yeah.
And I was able to digest most of it. But someone, please reach out to me on Twitter at RyanMcQuaid77. Tell me how the Helen Mirren scene works, because I still need somebody to figure it out. And if you can't, and if you can do it, I'll be your friend for life. I'll be your friend till the end. And I'll tell you all about it when I see you again.
Okay, good job. Well, I think for me, a lot of that simply comes down to, it's the same reason why Tess could find Dom in that bar, or how, when Dom goes to Brazil, Dante just happens to be there as well. Conveniently.
Well, she did have God's eye, to be fair. She did have God's eye.
Yeah, okay. But again, that's the technology that has to be used to make sense of any of this. So, like,
I mean, it does. See, the God's eye works there, but it's Helen Mirren doesn't have the damn God's eye, and he doesn't have it. So how does it work?
I don't know. How did Dante know that Dom was going to be in Brazil? Because at that point, he didn't have God's eye.
That's
true. He just happened to know.
But he just knew he was going to be there.
He just knew. I had an intuition.
Hey, come on now.
Like, they just like, how did Han know how to find Deckard? Like, they didn't explain that at all.
I mean, if a man tried to blow you up,
just keep tabs on one at all times.
You would keep tabs on that guy.
I mean, to me, it's just kind of this. Like, I feel like she heard the news, took the next flight, and found him on that building there in all of Rome. She just knew where to go.
Hell yeah!
So, like, I mean, again, this is Convenience the movie, as is the case with all of them.
Sometimes a good convenience can go a long way. You know
It can, and apparently it is necessary for the Fast and Furious franchise. And in my overall thoughts on this film, really comes down to how hollow I feel this is comparatively to the others. I mean, I totally agree with Ryan that you really have to go in wanting a giant ham sandwich. And even then, it felt like I was just eating the bread and a lot of the ham was just missing, because a lot of this is just setup. This is just set up to the next movie where we're going to get the ham. Like, this is just, the 2 pieces of bread and maybe some mayonnaise or whatever, toppings you want to throw on your ham sandwich. Like, that's That's all this is, and
Maybe some lettuce,
maybe some
a little bit of mayo.
Well, yeah. So
You want a sharp cheddar? You want a Swiss? It doesn't matter.
yeah, like this
Toast
is
the
just the
bread.
prep. Yeah, this is just the prep of the
Maybe
sandwich.
like a little Grey Poupon.
Yeah. So when we get to the ham in the next two, maybe collectively it will create that delicious sandwich,
Or you could
and
just
you'll
have
get
it by
all of that
itself.
sodium and ham that you want.
You a little barbecue sauce on that, like grilled pineapple.
Right, it's got off the rails. But that is to say, like, this is just a lot of fluff. It's a lot of air. It's a lot of cameos, and for some reason, Jacob has to die for reasons that that's the moment of the film I can't explain or really
I
wrap
just
my
feel
mind
bad
around.
for John Cena.
Yeah,
It's like
I
the guy that like literally makes hundreds of thousands of Make-A-Wishes for little kids, and
I just
does
yeah.
so in this movie too, only to then get killed. Like, thanks, America.
Well, and there's something so hilariously ironic that if he's the one character that doesn't come back, like they maintain his death in that moment, that will truly astound me given all of the other deaths we've seen that are, by comparison, I think way worse than what we get with Cena.
I mean, this is
and
like 25 missiles and 10 cars, and he's strapped in.
and
Use
the missile. Like, I
it's
don't.
worse
The kid
than Han.
fixed it.
It's worse than Han, but I would say Giselle's is a lot worse, because at least with this one, you could say, like, I survived the fire like Han did. This is her falling out of there. I literally
I don't get it. Like,
I don't get that.
Look, I believe that Cena's coming back, for one. I do believe Cena's coming back.
Well,
but if he doesn't,
I mean, if they're gonna like recontextualize their movies, right? If 10 is to recontextualize 5, and then 11 is to recontextualize and go back to 6,
which we assume they're going to do in some way.
Wouldn't it make sense to recontextualize 12, which would be the end, to another time when we thought it could be the end with 7? And that's when we see Paul Walker return?
I think so. Or Brian. Brian will return.
It's going to look as close to Paul Walker as possible. It's going to be like,
look, the cynical part of me is going to believe that it's going to be AI Paul Walker. That's what they're going to do. It's going to be something so cruel that we're just going to, it's going to be the worst.
it's going to be, I hesitate to even say like, it will be him. You know what I mean? It'll be him. You know what I mean? Like he's been sitting back, literally not watching, like not like making movies. I don't know. It's just it's
a clone, maybe.
Like a clone or something. Like the idea of it is so sick to bring back Brian, but it just feels like what they're leading to. And if we're wrong,
I
if we're wrong, I'd be happy. I think you and I would be happy, JD. But I know how Hollywood works. I've been in this long enough.
Look,
I know how.
If you just recast the character with another person, to me that's less problematic.
Yeah, just get Brad Pitt.
Sure. At this point, anything is on the table.
I mean, get Chris Pratt. He's making billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Actually, Pratt wouldn't actually be too bad. It's not far off.
Just at this point, just recast with someone else. Ooh. and it'll be fine.
Chris Pine wouldn't be bad. He kind of looks a little Walker. She's got a little bit of like that.
Fine.
Chin. I'm telling you, Patrick Wilson's
all of the
Chris's
are on the table.
Even Messina?
Sure. Fuck. I mean, you're labeling off all the Chris's, so
listen. If I got Chris Messina in a Fast and Furious movie, we'd all be happy. All right.
At any rate.
It's our best Chris.
If you want to skip out on this one, although if you're listening to this point, you've already seen it, but Yeah, I don't know. I'll circle back to this conversation once we see the next two films, and we'll see if it recontextualizes.
Come back
us at all.
around. We'll find out if we're dead wrong about our cynicism and or if Jay was absolutely on the money.
Yeah, he might have been, and I would not be surprised, sadly. At any rate, let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our thoughts here. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. You can hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We would love to hear from you. Be sure to stay tuned for this week's episode, main show episode 535, I believe it is, where Jay and Brendan, they're going to be talking about, I guess it's a 2023 catch-up podcast, I believe it's going to be. They're going to talk about some movies they've caught up with.
First quarter catch-up, just a lot of, if you're more of a mustard listener, I apologize, but it's a catch-up episode. Yeah. And it's just a bunch of movies that we haven't talked about here on the show. They can include Super Mario Brothers and I think Evil Dead Rises and a couple of other things.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
just want to go ahead and give a look out for that. Also, later this week, we'll be releasing a new episode of the Wong Kar-wai series where Jay and I talk about the maybe masterpiece that is In the Mood for Love.
Yeah.
So there you go. A much different, but yet weirdly similar film to Fast X.
Yeah. It's the same movie, basically.
I mean, shot for shot remake.
Yeah, exactly.
If the last Fast and Furious movie was directed by Wong Kar-wai.
Oh, could you imagine?
Holy hell. I would be there.
I would be there opening night. Yes, absolutely. That would be incredible. Highly doubt that's going to happen, but my God, I would love that.
Listen, we can all dream.
We can all dream. Yes, that is absolutely sure. But yeah, stay tuned for that review, In the Mood for Love, that is coming out. Be sure to check out Women in Session. Their latest episode dropped just a few days ago as well. And again, episode 534 is where we talked about the Fast and Furious franchise. If you want to stay in the Fast and Furious mode, but yeah, enjoyed this. Thanks, Ryan, for being here. Really do appreciate it, my friend. And we will see you all next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Oh man, Momoa was fun. What a great performance.
Really need some muffins.